yeah, we got part three of this interview. So yeah, let's go. Let's not waste no time. Let's go.
Sound. That's a not new way of sound. So he worked in the interval between natural sound and recorded sound, plus the effects of doing them together in the architectural 20th century environment. Therefore, he was molding. Now, I want to show you this. You're supporting what my thesis is. Frank was a satellite conductor. That was the unconscious and unconscious, and you can see it as a motif all the way through. What is the first thing he builds at Studio Z? A rocket ship. And you started saying things that totally, I'd have to re-listen to the tape. You started sparking off references point, accidentally. You go, Frank was like building a rocket ship, but it's like you're not in the rocket ship, but you go out there. You said that only you get out there on the moon. Well, that if you read his description in the Little Ontario Daily Report, which we were reading, he's being interviewed about his movie called Just Captain Beefheart at that point, and he's got the satellite. The studio's a satellite, and Billy Sweeney wants to create a rocket to get to the moon. He wants to do the impossible. Think of later, 30 years later, why not? The impossible was part of his logo. So he's trying to do the impossible. He's Vulcan and he's doing alchemy. But now, in 1978, in May 78, archival memory, in Downbeat, he did this incredible interview where he talked about moving around the air as sculpture. Think of Beefheart as his image of a great sculpture, a parallel reference point for him as Beefheart, the genius sculpture kid. He wants to make air sculpture. Now, you never read that interview, I guess. You're on the road too busy, but he says it to you 3-4 years later. But when some people read that, I remember meeting guys from the 60s, and they phased out of Frank during the Turtle section or something. People phased in and out.
Sure.
And they said, I didn't like Frank in the early 70s, middle 70s, but they didn't hear his music. When I read the Downbeat interview, I knew that guy was a genius.
Right.
And they got back into him, which then gets into the compositions he made in interviews. Okay. Now, you have this sculpture moving. Then, on the Music Makers, he says, the lawyer says Frank had ridiculous dreams. Like he said, we got to get our own satellite. And Larry says, well, that costs $500 million. Frank says, no problem, we'll do it. And that was that. And then Van Carlson comes over the night, and he tells us, I brought up that story. He says, well, I was in, when we went over in January 90 to Moscow, we went to the bureaucrat of Goss Film. And I don't know if you know this, and he said Frank's, the guy was bragging about their new satellite going up. So Frank, jumping on the president, said some things, and it ended up, the guy says, we can offer you a satellite. He actually pulled it off, and it was going to be CNN. Right. You know what I mean? Not CNN. And he was going to do it. And so I don't know when he told Larry that cost $400 or $500 million, but let's assume it's before they got the Gospel. This lawyer guy, I think his name's Larry. He didn't know maybe what Van Carlson experienced. That this bureaucrat actually was. Frank knew the universe. He had faith, Catholic faith, whatever that faith is, that he could find it, even though it cost $500,000. And life led to him. The wall goes down. He ends up in Moscow. He's talking to the Goss Film bureaucrat.
All the pieces start fitting together.
Right. And the bureaucrat, he energized. He just thought it'll happen. Think it'll happen. And then the Goss Film guy says, oh, we got a great satellite going up and blah, blah, we don't know what to put on it.
Guess what?
Yeah.
You're looking at the new pilot, baby.
Now look at that's like 92, and it's 90, but it's almost 30 years from 62.
Right.
And he's still working with satellite. Now you look at, he goes, some like it hot, some like it cold in Pajama people. He wasn't very aware of McLuhan's writings, but Marshall wrote about the satellite conductor using hot media and cold media, whole industrial phase, and then the software phase, the modern and the postmodern, and the satellite conductor, satellite government, the White House is the front, the red herring for the real satellite, for the secret instructions. Frank was imitating in that, and I call that the satellite conductor. That's why he could use conspiracy information, paranoia information, to fit into the secret instructions level.
Absolutely, man, because he was just mocking it.
He was mock-lating. Nobody knows, and I'll have to take credit for this. I'm the one who's saying he's satellite conductor. You're confirming from your own experience that that's what he was.
No doubt.
And I'm saying it for the first time. I got the word. He's the satellite conductor, and he's imitating. And that's why he was so proud when he went to NASA. He met a guy from NASA, and I think they showed him some landing, the Voyager stuff. He would always want to be.
Oh yeah, I remember because he gave me the pin when they went to Saturn. When he went into JPL, he actually gave me his pin of that particular expedition.
Yeah, they gave him.
I saw it there, and I saw. Oh my God, that's beautiful. He says, just take it. Frank was like that sometimes. He'd give you
There's
shit.
the generosity.
Like when Warren Cucurullo came out on the New Year's Eve concert when we played Polly.
Right.
And Warren stayed over at his house. He said, "Wow, that's a beautiful sitar, Frank." And Frank the kid wasn't even in the band at this point. Up to that point, Warren was always the quintessential fan.
Right.
You know, whenever we played
He's at the beginning, Baby Snakes.
Correct.
Right. Yeah.
And when Frank gave him that sitar, I said, "In 6 months." He said,
Yeah.
Sure enough, I think it was 4 months. But the
In
fact
other words,
that
he
was
wouldn't
a
be
kid.
generous. Now the point is that he's generous, but he also knew intuitively that this guy should be given something because he's probably going to work for Frank eventually.
That's right.
Yeah,
That's right.
Yeah. So I think when I heard Frank or Gail,
He was like that with so many people too. When you
Right.
least expected it, and that goes too with giving praise. When you least expected it, and most likely needed it,
yeah,
that's when you got
maybe
it.
he was intuitive. He knew.
He was
see-
fucking intuitive.
Yeah.
Oh, definitely, man.
And
That's an understatement.
Yeah, and Gail was interviewed by Howard Stern just sometime after Frank died,
Mm-hmm.
and she was talk, and the normal Stern, silly, pornographic kind of talk. And then at the very end, the closing statement by Gail was, Frank was a very. You hear it. It's audio.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, it's not on TV.
I'd
Yes,
love-
audio.
I'd love to.
You probably have that, eh, Jerry?
No.
Okay, so but anyways, Gail goes.
I've never heard Gail in an interview.
Okay, so Gail at the end, her closing remark says, you're thinking, okay, this is the widow, she's sad and whatever, and you have different public images of Gail, different public images of Frank, plus you know what other people think of them, and then you hear Gail goes, he was such a kind person. It was like she was talking like a social worker about a client.
Yeah.
She goes, he was such a kind person for Howard, he wouldn't believe it. Now, I know the people, he was considered an asshole, a mean guy, but the point is, now what he's orchestrating is the love, the anthropomorphic, the nice guy, but also the media was this violent monster coming at us. He had to be mean dealing with the monster. He's orchestrating hot and cold, and some like it hot, some like it cold, but Frank could be both, and he come out accidentally with his associates, could do it at the right time when the person needs the hot. He's working with physical reality, above and below consciousness, which is the satellite environment. It's an invisible, inaudible environment.
That's right.
You see how much his life makes sense in that concept?
Entirely. And to bridge those gaps, that mass of spectrum there is just phenomenal. And like what you said about Gail, it's almost like a social worker.
Yeah.
It was like, yeah, we understand.
Yeah,
you know what I mean?
Yeah. Or no, she was like not involved with him, just observing.
That's what I mean.
Very
that's
detached.
right. But to end an interview like that, man,
it was that was interesting to hear that. And then
it's actually very fitting too, because there's no like big accolade or big eulogy. It's just like
it was a
this is
puzzle
what
to her. She says, "This guy was nicer than me." Yet normally the woman is the better half.
Yeah,
right.
But when truth comes out,
But she's saying, this guy was more of a woman than me. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
And she was puzzled. And in The Music Maker, she talks about the day Frank died, and they take a toast when he's going out or something. Beverly D'Angelo, I think, says this, and she says that Gail says, "Thanks for the great life." But it was like, thanks for the fucking great play you put on.
Yeah.
There was a funny way of detachment, like, this is the Rumpelstiltskin goblin guy who came into our lives, a UFO, and just the way, the detachment, he's dying when she says, thanks for the great life we had, or that you created, maybe it's we had. But isn't that funny that Frank created that effect? But that's because he was operating beyond the love, he was an angel in a sense, beyond the perception.
But Frank picked his players, Gail was picked for a reason.
Oh yeah, and I thought you meant musical. Yeah, it was all
I'm
theater.
talking about the
the
play.
theater was like Moon Unit.
Play.
People, that's why. This is outrageously non-sentimental, mean, Frank, to call your kids Dweezil and Moon Unit. But they didn't know he was operating beyond the love sentimental point.
Boy named
and
Sue.
it was
It
a
makes
play.
so much sense to me. I can't even.
As we're talking.
It
Well, in
always made sense.
you understood.
It always made sense.
Well, I would say that you, in some ways, you can't say this, but you had a special relationship because you brought. You see, Ben Watson makes the point that third stream jazz, Gunther Schuller, they were combining classical and jazz was the in thing in the 50s. But Frank was taking the new drug of the masses, rock, and he was making classical and combining classical and rock, or third stream classical. You know what I mean? The point is, he had to have a guy who could do that, and you were the guy.
Oh,
and
no
you were
doubt
Italian.
about it. No doubt.
And
Oh yeah,
and,
no doubt about it.
And you actually, you know, you were that part of Frank that went to school, learned all
You
this
got
stuff.
it. You got
you
it,
were the
man.
mirror.
You are the first person that ever said that to me.
And
that's
you knew
how
it?
I always felt. I always
You
felt
knew.
like that.
You were.
Because, man, the things that I heard in my head, before I joined Frank's band, I knew 2 songs, Peaches and Regalia and King Kong. That's all I knew.
You're right.
Because I had a band with Ed Mann in the Berkshires, and we played those 2 songs. I knew nothing of his
You were
music at
Frank,
all.
see?
And yet, when I came to him, and I heard the stuff that he was doing, it was exactly the chords I had been hearing, the juxtapositions of melodic motifs, the contrapuntal stuff, the odd time. It was all like, whoa, there's a cat on this planet that thinks, not exactly, but very similarly. So it was just like these 2 pieces of the puzzle just coming right
He
together.
couldn't have done, after Lather, he blopped everything out on Lather. Were you on any of the pieces on Lather?
Yeah, I'm
yeah, that's on that 70s. That's a bit of 77 in it.
Yeah,
You come in May 77.
absolutely.
But that was he dropped it and he moved. And what's really, you would say to you, a very important point. He put out Lather 77, and then in early 78 on tour, he started to do the cells and germs and change his whole thing. You didn't have to be a robot anymore. But I bet you it was due to you because you could expand. You brought in a whole new spectrum. You brought in a new thing, and he couldn't have done that without someone like you. For his
Well, he would have done something else. But I think I think he picked...
Now that's a good point. He could have done something else,
because
but it wasn't to be done. What had to be done is what was done, and that's
Right.
why you showed up.
And then it just built and built and built. I mean, that was a unit, man. That
Oh,
whole,
your band? You mean that band, that time,
particular
that time
band,
zone?
That was the strong band, man. You know.
Well, I remember seeing you guys. I saw you at UCLA. I saw you in September, end of September, Toronto,
when
77.
when Ike joined the band, Vinny.
Was that
Arthur,
before September 77?
No, that was a Terry Bozzio band, September 77.
Then they come in by January 78?
No, I believe it was a little bit later than that.
But in 78.
But in 70, oh yeah, it was the 78
78
band, sure. I forget when auditions, you know, that part of my mind, it just blanks out.
You were so involved in learning.
Yeah,
You were,
it was
you
just
were
like
absorbing.
another audition, whatever, and it was so, it was
But
actually
see-
kind of like hit or miss with Terry and Patrick were sort of coming back.
Right.
And they didn't, you know, like Terry, I remember when Terry quit the band, all he could say was, I don't know what to say.
He said that?
Yeah, it says, I don't know what to say, man.
You mean
And he didn't
know why?
He didn't know why, but he knew he had to blow. You
Yeah.
know what I mean? And he didn't really have anything to go to. And I think Patrick sort of did it, sort of because Terry was doing it. I
Right,
never.
that's the 78 shift that he didn't jump into. You're saying.
Right.
Yeah, he's
right.
part of that 77.
And I often wonder what that band would have been if those guys decided not to jump ship.
Right.
Because that was a very powerful thing. Although it was predictable, every night was the same. What would have come out of that, you know? And I think Frank needed a new chemical kind of configuration.
Okay, let me say this before I forget. I saw him in Toronto in September 77, then in LA in November 77.
That's right.
At the Poly Pavilion?
Poly Pavilion, then
Yeah.
we played Poly again that year at the midnight show.
You mean later in the year? Or later that
well,
night?
it would have been
day?
it would have been 70. It would have been 78 at that point
Oh, yeah.
because it was midnight of the new year.
Right,
so,
right.
So that was actually the first day
Yeah.
of. Yeah.
Okay, now what is the concept? Tom Snyder and the Spiders from Mars.
Mm-hmm.
Is there any reference? Is there something? Can you really? Is Mars is in the group by that time?
Well, the thing started with Manx Needs Women,
Right.
and then it turned into Mars Needs Women, which is the
So it
movie.
was you.
So he changed it for me, yeah, and then
What's the movie? Mars Needs Women.
Mars Needs Women. Don't you remember that sci-fi movie?
Oh, it's not you. It's
No,
not
but-
about you.
No, but the song
But
originally was Mars Needs Women, and then there was this guy Manx or something.
Right, it became Manx Needs Women.
Women. But then when we did it again, it was Mars Needs Women, because I joined the band. You
And
know
then did
what I
that become the Spiders from Mars? That's the,
Well-
I saw the bootleg. Maybe it's an erroneous title. Tom Snyder and the Spiders from Mars. Isn't that right, Jerry? You know?
Yeah, that's a little complicated. It was the TV show Frank was doing with Tom Snyder. He said Spiders from Mars. So
I don't
it
think there's
could
any.
be
I
no
think it's just.
connection
I
there.
think it's just a coincidental thing.
But it's purposeful to bring up because now we're finding out that Mars, that Manx Needs Women, refers to Mars.
But it
Needs
really
Women.
started off as Mars Needs Women. You know what I mean?
Right.
That's where Frank got the illusion.
Because it was
from.
about you?
No.
He was reminded.
It was a movie, and then he changed the name to Manx Needs. I didn't know this guy Manx,
So it has nothing to do with you.
but a little bit. by the fact that when we did it again, it became Mars Needs Women again.
Oh, he went back to
He went back to Mars Needs Women.
Oh, and that's late in '78 later, and it's not
in '78.
It's not an official song title.
Right, and I think part of that Tom Snyder allusion is from Spiders of Destiny.
Right, yeah.
You know, because we were rehearsing that song as well. So that was just like, a lot of times Frank would just like these little motivic things, either literally or musically or sociologically, they would just bleep in. You know what I mean? We have lingo.
But they fit. See, he wrote Finnegan's Wake.
And you guys have no clue, man, about how late night television would enter rehearsals. Like, we would put ourselves in fucking
from the night before?
Yeah, like for instance, it could have been Tom Snyder one night. But you know, when we get off rehearsals, we'd go home, watch TV, or go over to Frank's house, watch TV.
Right.
And like, one thing that was, most people would never know, but you remember that show Fernwood Tonight?
Oh yeah, I liked it. Martin Mull.
Or Mary Hartman, which preceded it.
Yeah.
It was just like, you know, some people wouldn't think that Frank was kind of like a, quote, soap opera type
or
of guy.
Mainstream TV consumer.
That's the word I'm looking for, right?
Yeah.
But we would discuss what happened on Mary Hartman.
After watching it.
After watching it, and matter of fact, the Fernwood theme song we would play a lot. It never got recorded, but this was in the rehearsal phase of that particular period. And, you know, it used to be just so funny how things from those shows or something that was in the news, it would just be like lingo that popped in, and it was just like some little chemical thing.
See, he was I don't know if he did it consciously, but it was just his lifestyle allowed him to monitor the media and the pop culture. He's studying what he called ethnic folk, retrieving the classical music. You know,
I think that you can hear that. I think that as crazy as Zappa's music is, like I've said it before, he could have been one of the wealthiest men in music ever by making jingles for adverts. I know he did do one advert, but do you know what I mean? That was more kind of him making like sound effects to fit a kind of a short bit of footage of whatever it was. But there's actual like really poppy and a very like it's not all out of there. Sometimes you just get these things and literally it could be sounding like something that you'd hear in an elevator. Do you know what I mean? Or a lift. Do you know what I mean? Or then it could be something that you'd hear, like say, like reggae. Do you know what I mean? He's got too vast knowledge of things and true forms of them things to not be somehow switched into them to what they're saying. Do you know what I mean? To mainstream culture. And like the thing is that doing things creative is great, but you almost need something a little kind of what's the word? Mindless, that you can just put on and not have to think about. But yeah, I need some more coffee and we will carry on. There was something else I was going to say. That I'm surprised at them saying he was nice. But in a way I can kind of get it, but like he doesn't seem. But then I also think that there's a part of just being a man that is that. Because if you are nice, if you are seen to be nice as a man, people will take advantage of you. So you have to appear a monster to keep the wolves at bay, basically. But anyway, hold on, I need some coffee. 2 seconds. Let's carry on.
exactly right. And revamping it, recycling it.
And he'd be watching it. And the point is, he was the guy, the central scrutinizer, processing the live news of every day. And his
well, that was later on when CNN. Then it became that.
No, I was just going to say that. But he was already doing it from 1955 on.
Fucking A.
Watching it, putting it into his concept. Now, here's the thing.
Ernie Kovacs.
He wanted to do a TV show, according to when the Mothers broke up in '69. He wanted to do a TV show right then. And he tried it in '97. It didn't happen. So then he's watching it, and he had the night school, that whole thing in the late '80s.
Right.
He was already ready to do it.
Oh.
And you know that Tom Van says that he has stuff in the vault. He taped panels. He was creating all through the '80s stuff for that TV show. But the point is, he wanted to create he wanted to be ZNN to CNN, or even before that, Johnny Carson. Johnny Zarson versus Johnny, because he knew that was the real molding of people's consciousness.
When Frank proposed that to me, man, I was so enthralled. That could have been.
You mean the night school? If that had
happened. When he said, "Tommy, you're my Paul."
Oh,
and I said, I have always wanted to do that, and Frank knew any moment I could just do anything for him. It was such a perfect thing. That was the Forum, national TV.
Jeez.
It was just like everything that I'm sure that he wanted at that time.
That was his final.
And how quickly that absolutely neutralized. It was so cruel, you know what I mean?
Right.
And then
but the conspiracy knew.
And then
the conspiracy.
Thank you so much.
Yeah,
yes, that's what it was.
It's all spelled out in this. We talk about it in the interview here.
But the euphoria that was going on for those
as
4
it started
days,
to happen.
for those 4
I remember.
days,
Listen, holy fuck!
Man, I almost couldn't keep my feet.
You couldn't take it. You had won the lottery.
I had won the big cosmic lottery.
Yeah.
And Frank, the eyes that he would give me, it was just like, man.
That would have been the ultimate composition. You know what I mean?
And you know what? It's just like inches in seconds. That stuff.
Yeah.
It wasn't.
You mean when you're doing it, or in terms
of
realizing it?
Realizing it, having it actually come to fruition. Those things. It's just like.
But that's where the secret
phone
calls were made.
Yeah, I
the
know.
secret NBC, whoever network, where they were calling the White House. Everybody said, "This can't be happening." You know what I mean? And they might have said, "We're going to do it." They go over to call Frank. The other line rings. What's this? It's the White House. You can't fucking do that.
You want to know something? From that concept, I never asked Frank this question. It always puzzled me. Why, in fact, that he had to be subservient to American television? Why we couldn't have taped those shows over in England or Germany or anywhere?
Because America was the big note. It was a global culture.
Yeah.
It was the thing that went, nothing matters until it gets into
the American system.
Dan Rather on the news.
Yeah.
Now look at the metaphor of having Daniel Shore. They have the
yeah. No kidding, man.
He's got to have
tight with Frank. Yeah.
And why was he's a guy who, like many other people in the music industry, were involved with Frank a lot more than Daniel Shore. But why did Daniel Shore have the special importance? Because he was the mirror image of Dan Rather.
There you go. There you go. Brilliant, Bob. Brilliant. I've often thought that. That is so brilliant.
That is the everybody was a player. Gail was a player. What was the phrase? Everybody was a player.
That's right.
And not just a musical player. A
player, man. In this fucking play.
He was Shakespeare. Frank was the.
I have used that quote. I have actually
that's
used
your
that.
idea.
That was my total idea.
And I didn't know it, so we both meet.
I've actually used that in quotes before. Hey Jerry, could we take a quick time out for me to evacuate?
Yeah, and how about, we must be near the end anyways.
No, let's let them pause and go for the break.
How much more minutes we got?
They had the porta potty right there.
Yeah.
And I go into the goddamn thing, and it's just like, this place is packed. These people are sitting on fucking ice, waiting for us, just reverently screaming. You know what I mean? And I go into right before showtime. I had to take a fucking dump so bad. I go in there, and this porta potty has shit mounded up to a point above where they sit.
Yeah.
The glass guy probably squatted. Last couple of guys squatted up. The shit was actually coming up like a little cone above.
You're getting this on tape? Yeah.
And I could, Jerry.
Well,
so
you have last
who
right?
Who gives a fuck?
No, it's true.
So anyway.
Do you know what? Yeah, this shows you, the spectrum of male conversation. Because I've literally done that journey with, do you know what I mean? When you're talking with your mate, you start talking about space, religion, politics, and you're going, and well, what about this, and then this, and then this, and do you know what I mean? You're going back and forth. But that conversation can just as easily go to, I had a curry the other night. Jesus, my ass was burning. Do you know what I mean? Like, in male conversation, both is valuable. That's what made me laugh about it. That these two men have just sat there and spoke about unbelievably deep things, like on a deep level, but then it can be also, I needed to take a dump once.
I go in there.
Down in France. Yeah.
That's right when we were writing in France.
That
too.
was that story. This
Just-
what you're telling influenced him?
No
But-
doubt about it.
so
'cause
what'd
it
you
was
do?
France. So anyway, I go up to it and I look at it. I said, and I said, right when we were right ready to go on stage, and I said, Frank, I gotta take a shit, man. It's incredible because we had a long powwow before the gig.
Yeah.
Anyway, so I screamed bloody. I said, "What the fuck?" You know what I mean? And Frank says, "What's going on in there?" I says, "Come up here and look at this." So he goes in and he says, "Oh my God!" He says, "I'm not taking a shit in here until we get a new potty, Frank. And I've got to go. I can't do it. You know, if I start singing, it's just gonna come right out."
Yeah.
Anyway, he says, "Boy, I see what you mean. Sure, Tommy." No problem." So the show had to get held about 20 minutes. They got to find a potty out there and bring it in. It
And
was
they're yelling?
horrendous.
Were
but
the
it was
people yelling?
But you mentioned. Oh yeah, they were. But it was.
They were
It was
getting mad.
reverent. No, they weren't getting mad. They
It
were
was
just
okay.
anxious.
It's just
Sure.
you want to help them, but you got to do this.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
But the fact is, you talk about, that was a quick dump. This was like the dump of like Olympian record proportions. It was flip, flap, flap,
You probably didn't even
blam,
wipe yourself
showtime.
properly, right?
Oh
It's
no, it
just-
was clean sphincter control. I think it was just like a perfunctory.
Oh, you're lucky.
A perfunctory wipe. It just bam, it
Well,
happened.
you have those lucky wipes. Sometimes you,
You
have
bet.
a
Sometimes
messy
you don't.
wipe.
Sometimes you
they
don't.
cut off clean.
Right. That's what this was, man.
You were lucky. You
I
had a
was way
clean
lucky.
cutoff. This is on tape. This
I
is
was
the good out.
lucky.
This is the lumpy gravy talk.
But you mentioned
had
that
a
was
clean
cleaned up.
sphincter.
Absolutely,
Yeah,
man.
so you can do it in three.
But that was
three wipes.
like
you know what I mean?
I was sort of a
Three toilet paper wipes, right?
Oh, it was
And that
only one, baby.
Oh,
it was just
that's
so
unheard
clean.
of, Tommy.
I could literally blow this conversation up to a next level. Right, you take this level of male chat, talking about sometimes you can get a clean drop, other times it's like, do you know what I mean? Something's been murdered back there. Like, yeah. But literally, what would turn this up? You literally just throw in the middle of this conversation, what about farts in the bath? How epic do they smell? Like, literally, I've had that conversation so many times with different people.
You were possessed.
No, I am very.
Oh, you know how to do it.
I know the trick. My dad was
Okay.
a doctor.
It depends on what I
Jerry, you're
eat.
so sweet, man. Thank you, buddy.
So when you were in there having a piss, did you have a thought as an effect of what we've said so far? Something you want to bring up, or do I come up with something?
I just was. The main thought that I had was how wonderfully glorious this exchange has been so far. I was just thinking, boy, this is what I call a very astute and in tune individual that I'm talking with, and I'm very grateful for that.
Oh, I appreciate it.
That's the thought that came to me.
Well, that's great, because I know him that, and I wish I had more chances to talk to Frank when he was alive to do it, because I knew. Did you notice, and you haven't read the interview with Frank that I did, through the medium? You haven't read that yet, or heard
I think
it?
I read a
Well,
couple of
he
little...
really surprised me. He said, I was talking about how that interview, the first one, got bootlegged.
Mhm.
And it's this beautiful bootleg, 30 Years of Frank Zappa, and it has a beautiful booklet.
Wow.
And I open up the thing. This is where, it kind of makes you think it is really Frank. I said, that interview did, blah, blah, blah. Well, it got bootlegged. And he says, well, you're in good company. And I go, what do you mean? And he says, well, that's what the thing about me. I was always bootlegged, and it was an honor,
Mhm.
And this is from perspective of that, because he didn't like it when it was alive.
Absolutely.
But he knew it was an honor even then. So I go, oh, okay, well, yeah, it's an honor. I'm in good company. I got bootlegged,
That's
I made
right.
the short list,
Right.
So then later in the interview, he totally surprises me. Somehow it came up, and he said, you should have been in rock and roll. And I said, what do you mean? Because I didn't know I could play an instrument. And he said, and I did not know. Well, I never had any instrumental training. And he says, and I said, well, he says, you could have been in my band. I go, what? And then I said, what instrument would I play? He says, it doesn't matter.
Doesn't
Just
matter,
show
man.
up on time. But he just show up in time. And then just shortly after, what was the story that triggered? Who told us about that? Showing up on time. I don't know what it was. I heard it was somebody in the band, someone later say in an interview that, Oh, it was Mike Keneally on his webpage.
Hmm.
When he joined the band, the important point he pointed out, and I just read it a few months ago, was he had to be on time. That was the most important thing. Is that true in your experience?
Absolutely.
Yeah. And so I said, Jerry, and then the interview got misprinted. And the part that didn't get in Flipside and had to be redone, they left out a third of it, was right at the point where you could be in the band. No, I go, what instrument would I play? Something like that, right at that point. And so you don't know what he's going to say to that. And my friends said, well, what instrument do we, they were really intrigued by this question. But the point is, when Jerry sent me the missing page, and I look at it, and so I read, and I had to read it to an old buddy, the guy who turned me on to Frank, way back in the 60s. I read it to him, and I was reading it. I just read Keneally a few days before, The Synchronicity, and I go, it says, just show up on time. And I'm reading this to Steve mechanically, and then, wait a minute, Steve. This is fucking proof. It is fucking Frank.
Right.
And I finished talking to Steve, and I called Jerry. I said, look at this. And I told Jerry, and he knows enough about the Zappa scene. He said, that's fucking right. That it doesn't matter. If you're on the team, like Ian Gale's the player, Daniel Shore, you don't have to play an instrument. Just show up on time is the musical reference point, but it's so Frank.
Music, yeah.
It's so Frank.
Because music is time and space,
That's
man.
right.
And the space will take care of itself. Just be in the time frame, and then it happens.
You know that.
I just got to quickly...
Yeah. But that's also... Do you know what I mean? The amount of actual jobs I've had where people will just say that. They go, look, you'll be fine. Just turn up on time and just get your head down and do your work. You'll be sweet. Do you know what I mean? Yeah, it's like, there's something, again, like we go back to the mainstream thing. There's something very kind of meat and potatoes about that too. But yeah, I'm gonna stop it there because I should finish the Elvis one. I'm trying to get both of this one and the Elvis documentary done. Yeah, but we'll finish this off tomorrow. So I don't know. We're not even got that long left, but I have to move on to the Elvis thing. But yeah, we will carry this on tomorrow. So